The Grizzly is back, some great news for equine safety, and a tribute to a legend. This and more on this episode of the Win Place Show. Salutations and welcome, friends. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and this is another episode of the Win Place Show here on NYRA YouTube, where we cover everything horse racing and handicapping to get you ready for the sport that we love. Now, before we get into this episode, want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos are dropping on the channel, and we have something new just about every single day, whether it is recapping the Derby and Oaks races from the previous week, programming like this one, race previews of upcoming races, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials. We got you covered here at NYRA Bets. We're a great location for you as a horse player, so make sure to press that like and subscribe button today. All right, well, listen, a lot of news to get to this week. And looking back to last week, listen, if you want to hear our thoughts on the Tampa Bay Derby, you can check out me and Kaylee Shapiro recapping that on our Road to the Derby and Oaks episode from yesterday. But I'm going to leave that kind of to the side for the most part, with maybe one minor exception. And I think the big story from this past weekend was the return, of course, of Thorpedo Anna and the Azeri. And this is, you have to understand, we need superstars in horse racing. I don't mean to start off by getting on a soapbox, and I promise not to be on it very long, but we need superstars in horse racing. We have superstar jockeys, Flavien Prat, Irad Ortiz Jr., Joel Rosario, when he makes those thrilling runs from the back of the field. We have those. We have superstar trainers, Chad Brown, Bob Baffert, right? Brad Cox, Todd Pletcher, Kenny McPeak. Now, Bob and Chad and Kenny are pretty good on a microphone. Todd is sometimes a little dry. Brad is usually a little dry too. So we have superstar trainers, but they're not always, the most dynamic people. And honestly, a lot of casual fans don't necessarily know who those people are at all. We need superstar horses. And the last couple of years, we have lacked superstar horses, unfortunately, really since the departure of Flightline. And even Flightline was so problematic in some ways, and I know generated so much debate online because he had such a brief racing career in terms of the amount of time spent on the track. But we have been looking for superstars in the sport. That's how you market this to fans. And I remember talking to a gentleman this summer up in Saratoga, and we were talking about the Yankees, actually, and he was wearing an Aaron Judge jersey. And I said, what if Aaron Judge just played for the Yankees for 1 year? And maybe 2 years, and then didn't play for the Yankees anymore, would you, and just retired, would you get an Aaron Judge jersey? And he said, no, of course not. I said, that's the problem we have in horse racing. I said, these horses come around, they run for 1, maybe 2 years, poof, they're gone. It's hard to generate fandom when horses aren't on the track a lot. So it is great to see a superstar like Thorpedo Anna, who went up against the boys in the Travers, nearly got the job done against Fierceness, beat Sierra Leone, who, of course, went on to win the Breeders' Cup Classic and, easily demolished the rest of the boys in that field. So it was, then she just ran through her own generation without any problem. And then, of course, punctuated the year by winning the Breeders' Cup Distaff in gate-to-wire fashion, looking rather easy in that regard. Now she's back as a 4-year-old. This is a horse that has generated a lot of buzz. This is a horse people are a fan of. Now, we have issues in our sport as it relates to how do we do better for the bettors, for sure. We have issues in the sport, which we'll talk about a little bit later with regards to equine safety. Absolutely. But we also need, from a marketing standpoint, to market stars and market the horses that are the stars. And Thorpedo Anna coming back really signifies this because it's not just her this year. It is Fierceness coming back. It is Sierra Leone coming back. Those are big deals because those are horses people know. Thorpedo Anna, the casual fan probably heard of. Fierceness, certainly the casual fan remembers because he was the post-time favorite in the Kentucky Derby, and there were a lot of features on him leading up to that. Sierra Leone was involved in that very thrilling finish in the Kentucky Derby and then won the Breeders' Cup Classic. So these are horses that have broader name appeal than maybe, the horse that we really like that won a random stakes race at Ellis Park over the summer. No shots at Ellis Park or any random stakes races, but again, you need horses with broad appeal, and that's what Thorpedo Anna and Fierceness and Sierra Leone have. And honestly, even a horse like White Barrio, a horse that I think a lot of people really like, the fact that he's now back and has seemed to rediscover his form now that he's back in Saffy Joseph Jr.'s barn. So there's a lot of horses out there. And then you see, obviously, the ascension of horses like a Locked this year coming out of the Santa Anita Handicap Mind Frame, winning that Gulfstream Park Mile. These are good things to see. That older division is getting stronger on the man side, but Thorpedo Anna coming back in the Aziri, great to see. And rolling as a 1-9 favorite probably should. And the fact that she ran that well off the bench, earned a 95 buyer speed figure in that race, it was easy. I mean, Free Like a Girl, God bless her, is a hell of a horse. I wish I owned her, the horse that finished second. I mean, talk about a hard-knocking horse. I mean, just some crazy statistics when you look at how much she's won and hit the board over the last during her career. And that's just been really incredible. So nothing but respect for Free Like a Girl. But, I mean, that field just wasn't going to challenge Thorpedo Anna. It was a perfect opportunity for her to get warmed up for the Apple Blossom. Looks like Power Squeeze is going to be pointed there. And that's an interesting horse who, of course, won the Grade 1 Alabama last year at Saratoga. And remember, that was a race that Thorpedo Anna did not run in because she was getting ready to run in the Travers against the boys. So she kind of ceded the Alabama to the rest of her crop and generation. And son of a gun, if Power Squeeze didn't win. So that would be fun to see because really Power Squeeze is the only other kind of, filly that's won a Grade 1 kind of later in the year after the Oaks preps, won a Grade 1 that Thorpedo Anna didn't. So it'll be interesting to see that showdown. That could be a lot of fun. But again, superstars coming back. You love to see it. My colleague, Kaylee Shapiro, I thought she played it right on the cross-country pick 5. You single it, you move on. Don't get cute. There are races where you can get cute. I got cute a couple weeks ago and was lucky because I, beat a horse like Muhima, let's say, who was, a pretty heavy favorite. So there's times where you could go against an odds-on favorite and get a win for sure. That wasn't one of them. That's a single and you move on. You just move on. And you go, well, from a betting standpoint, it may not, rub people the wrong way sometimes. From a betting standpoint, it makes your pick 5 a lot easier to build out. So there's that. I mean, yes, playing that race straight doesn't really give you a lot of options, for sure. But, playing that race as part of a sequence, it's a free square. Fantastic. You take it, you move on. You try to find bombs in the other legs. But it's more important than just the betting because it's really the fandom and getting people more and more excited in the sport. And you get more people excited in the sport, you know what they do? Son of a gun, they bet the sport. And that's good too. So, you got to get people in the front door and then you have to get them actually excited about betting as well, and then getting them excited about the other horses that are running. So it's a process for sure. But that first step is getting people interested in the horses and the superstars in our sport. Again, there's ways of marketing this sport from a betting standpoint, which we need to be doing as well. So it is a multi-pronged attack by no stretch. Is it we just have to do X and then Y happens? It is we have to do A through Z and then hopefully Y happens. But that was a big return for Thorpedo Anna. Now, a lot of other returns on the track this past weekend. We saw a return of a horse like Saffron Moon and Zulu Kingdom in Tampa Bay. Saffron Moon winning the Hillsborough, second start now in this year after setting the track record last time out. Zulu Kingdom making that debut in 2025, both trained by Chad Brown. And yeah, we're in Chad Brown season now, folks. Chad's been quiet. He's not been running a lot of horses, either at Aqueduct or at Gulfstream Park. He's been running a little bit more at Tampa, but honestly, not a lot. And that part of that is Chad, as if you listened to last week, myself and Acacia Clement talk about this, Chad gives most of his horses the winters off. So he's not running his best horses, and he's certainly not running his best turf horses over the winter. Well, now they're coming out. Now they're coming back, and we're all reminded, oh, right, Chad owns the turf, not just up here in New York. He owns the turf just about anywhere. And Saffron Moon looks so good. Such an explosive kick. Zulu Kingdom still strikes me as being a little immature, but is incredibly talented and really was able to do it up on the front end. He still has the propensity to kind of let up. You look at his ears in the stretch. They're kind of pinned back. They're not quite flicking around, but you can tell he's not fully engaged all the time. And that's an issue that Chad had mentioned before he even debuted in North America, that he was a little bit of an immature horse. And so it's interesting to see how he continues to progress this year. couple of other notable results from Tampa Bay over the weekend was Nitrogen coming back and winning for Mark Casse. And, Casse's got a couple of nice horses. Nitrogen and Vixen are both, I think, nice turf horses for him. And it's interesting. He's got a couple of different horses. He's obviously very notably got a horse like Sandman on the Kentucky Derby Trail. But, last summer, if you were up at Saratoga, you remember Mark Casse won a lot of 2-year-old maiden special weight races. He had a very deep bench. The question with him is, how are they going to move forward as 3-year-olds? Because I think that's sometimes the frustration with certain Casse runners is they come out very precocious, they come out, they win right away, and then they kind of flatten out, and they sometimes can level off. And it's been great to see horses like Nitrogen and Vixen kind of continue to move forward as 3-year-olds coming out of that juvenile juvenile fillies turf. And so that's been great to see as well. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a horse that I do like to talk about and who has honestly grown in my heart over the years, which is Skippy Longstocking winning the Challenger Stakes at Tampa for the 3rd consecutive year. And winning a really fun edition of the race and renewal of the race over Brad Cox's horse, Most Wanted, who that horse has done very, very little wrong. That horse has never been out of the exact, I believe it's 4 career victories, and only losses were to Skippy here and to Rattle and Roll in the Clark by a neck. So, this horse is, Most Wanted's a nice horse as well. But Skippy, man, as much as I talk about superstars, and we need them, man, Skippy is such a reliable horse. I mean, it's just it's so funny because that horse used to annoy me sometimes, Skippy Longstocking. But the more you follow that horse, you have to have respect for it because he goes out and he wins these grade 2s and grade 3s, and he's never quite up to a grade 1 level. He's probably never going to win a grade 1, but man alive, he cashes checks. And he wins a lot of money winning these grade 2 and grade 3 races. And you need horses like that. And he's as reliable as they come at that level. I think a horse like Hit Show is kind of slowly becoming the new Skippy Longstocking in some ways of like this grade 2, grade 3 horse that just kind of wins, isn't quite good enough when he steps up to grade 1, but man, he runs hard. I like horses like that because they infuse a lot of depth into that handicap division. And then more importantly, when they do step up into grade 1 races, it makes those grade 1 races more competitive because, yes, you have the cream of the crop, okay, those horses that I mentioned earlier, the Fiercenesses, the Sierra Leones, etc. But then when you can supplement that with like a horse like Hit Show, a horse like Skippy, a horse like Most Wanted, quite frankly, stepping up into a grade 1, suddenly you go, that horse might not be up to snuff, but that's not a bad horse. And suddenly you get a really strong field. So again, I love seeing the cultivation of a much stronger base in the graded stakes races because honestly, the last couple of years, you'd see a grade 3 race. Doesn't matter where, not picking on any in particular circuit at all. It doesn't matter where you look. You would see some grade 3 races, some listed stakes races, and you go, oof, this is more of an allowance race, it was a little rough. But when you have horses like Skippy and Most Wanted and Hit Show, they're running in those grade 3s. You go, hey, that's a legit grade 3 horse. That's a good race. The couple of nice horses in there. So it's good to see that continue to be replenished there as well. Now, there is some news as it relates to the Kentucky Derby picture. Brad Cox moving some of his chess pieces around, as is Bob Baffert. Cox moving John Hancock, who was entered in the Virginia Derby. That horse will scratch out of that race this Saturday and instead be pointed towards the Louisiana Derby. Rapture, the horse for Cox, who is also entered in the Virginia Derby, will run. But ultimately, John Hancock, like I said, moving down to the Louisiana Derby kind of signifies, in my opinion, that he's moved to the head of the class as Cox's number 1 hopeful. Maybe even ahead of Tappan Street. We'll see where Tappan Street ends up. Florida Derby, Bluegrass, Wood, all possibilities. Maybe the Arkansas Derby, though that feels a little less likely. We'll see. But I think it's interesting. Cox he's got some very, very good fillies with Good Cheer and Muhima, and of course Immersive, who's on the bench, but very good fillies. The boys, yes, he's got a deep bench. They haven't really like fired yet. So I feel like, John Hancock won that Sam F. Davis, and that certainly he was flattered with Owen Almighty coming back to win the Tampa Bay Derby the way he did. So that certainly is a good signal for John Hancock. But you look at some of these other horses like Tappan Street finishing second of Burnham Square. That horse comes back to being also ran in the Fountain of Youth. You look at a horse like Patch Adams, clearly probably does not want to do 2 turns. So some of the Cox's other horses that, had promising potential haven't necessarily come through yet. So it's going to be interesting to see these next couple of weeks. Additionally, Bob Baffert making some moves as well. As I said on this space last week, it felt inevitable that he was going to have a horse or maybe 2 entered in the Virginia Derby as kind of a way of continuing to mend fences, I feel like, with Churchill Downs, who now owns Colonial Downs. Excited for Colonial, by the way. Let me just say that. I lived in Northern Virginia for several years. My mom lives in Central Virginia, about an hour from the track, actually. And I've been to the track with my mom a couple of times. She loves horse racing as well. She's probably watching this at home. Hi, Mom. And, when you look at Colonial, that Virginia Derby, that Virginia Oaks, this 3-day event coming up this weekend, Travis Stone coming in to call the races, should be a lot of fun. I'm really happy for the folks at Colonial. All dirt races. And remember, every race is going to be a 1-turn race. Mile and an 1/8, mile and a 16th, all 1 turn. That's a big, big turf course, and you need an even bigger main track to go around it. So it's like the old Belmont, where and then the new Belmont too, but it's going to have that mile and an 1/8 chute coming out. So it's a 1-turn race. So something to keep in mind as you look at that. But as it relates to Baffert, he was going to enter gaming in the Virginia Derby, but that horse spiked a fever, and now Getaway Car takes his place. So that's going to be interesting to see. One of the things I will mention, Travis Stone tweeted this out, so I want to credit him for finding the statistic. But he looked at the fact that over the last several years, 22% of mile and an 1/8 races were won in gate to wire fashion. So 22% of 9 furlong races won in gate to wire fashion. At Colonial Downs, that number drops to 15%. Why? Because of that 1-turn configuration. It really hurts front runners. So something to keep in mind for Saturday at Colonial Downs, and anytime you're handicapping Colonial, looking at that mile and a 16th, mile and an 1/8 distance, and that very unusual 1-turn configuration. We also have the Derby futures. Pools are open. I love future pools. I love them to death. Journalism, I think, opened at 3-1. Oh, I love journalism, but I'm not betting him at 3-1. You're going to have to give me some better odds than that. There's still a lot of unknowns to see kind of what ends up happening between now and the first Saturday in May. As much as I love journalism, and he's my number 1 horse right now, still taking a short price on a horse like that, I think, is maybe a little foolhardy. I generally only like taking shots in future pools. I like going with bigger numbers. I like finding horses that are 20-1, 30-1 that I have a feeling could maybe step forward. So this late in the game, I understand the logic of finding a horse that you go, hey, this horse is 8-1 now, but could be 2-1 by the time the horse hits the starting gate. So I'm getting a much better price if I bet on this horse now. I understand that logic, and if you have that opinion about that horse, I get it. But for future pools, I tend to really go towards like really big prices, and anything that's 3-1, 5-1 just doesn't really interest me that much a lot of times. But listen, that's some of the news that's on the track, but there's a lot of news taking place off the track as well. And I think one of the big pieces of news that was really great to see was that yet again, racing fatalities have dropped by nearly 16% in 2024. And this is, like I said, really wonderful data to see coming in from the equine injury database. And the number of fatalities in thoroughbred flat racing in 2024 was 1.11 per 1,000 starts, which is the lowest rate since we began tracking this in 2009. It's also the 5th consecutive year that the fatality rate has been below 1.5 per 1,000 starts. So this has been a marked decrease, and it's great to see. Obviously, I was up there at Saratoga 2 summers ago, and that was a tough summer. And there was a tough time at Churchill Downs a couple years ago as well. These things happen. These spates of injuries happen, catastrophic in some instances. And it's great to see, though, that overall we are moving in the right direction with regards to equine fatality. And one of the interesting things to see is, first of all, by age, we obviously see the possibility of a fatal injury take place increase. So less common at 2-year-olds, more common 4 and up. By distance, shorter distances, the sprints you typically see, the short sprints you typically see a little bit of a higher rate there, 1.2 per 1,000 starts, as opposed to longer distance races, 0.98. So those longer distances tend to be a little bit safer. And then yet again, by surface, we do see that turf and synthetic continue to be the safer surfaces, with turf only having 0.88 fatalities per 1,000 starts, synthetic 1.02, and dirt 1.18. And while those numbers might sound very minuscule in terms of the difference with the number of starts that take place, these are statistically significant findings, just because your N count is so massive when looking at all of those. So, it's great to see that, like I said, we're moving in the right direction with regards to equine fatalities. And with that being said, one of the things that I think we do want to look at is how we continue to breed horses and breeding for continued health. And as it relates to that, we obviously have the OBS sales taking place right now in March, and they'll take place again in April. So we're seeing a lot of these 2-year-old breezes, and I know people have different thoughts on these 2-year-old breezes, that they get these horses really cranked up to breeze a furlong. Can they do it in 10 seconds? Can they get that 10 seconds? Can they get that 9.4, they get 9.8, or 9.4? Can they get that 9 4/5? Can they get that small number? And, it is a little concerning to see these young horses moving that fast. And then sometimes these horses having to take prolonged stretches to recover from that. But we are seeing the OBS sales. Maxfield, son of Maxfield, just sold for $1 million today to Japanese interests, actually. So that's something that we'll see. And it's so interesting to see. I was actually watching a clip of a Nyquist who was running, and I think he ran 10 flat. But you looked at him and you go, oh, this horse is going to want a lot more distance in the future. And you see that sometimes. So when you're watching these OBS videos, I think it's important to always keep in mind, what's the purpose of this horse? Is this horse going to continue to grow? And is this horse going to continue to fill out? Is this horse going to continue to want more distance? And so, no, the OBS work might not be that significant. It might be a little bit less. And so it's going to be interesting to see, obviously, how that plays out. And it's going to continue to be interesting to see how these first crop sires, Yopon, for instance, and Essential Quality, some of these first crop sires, it's going to be very interesting to see how do they sell at these different opportunities at OBS sales. How do they continue to develop? So very excited to see how all of that continues to play out down there in Florida. And if you want to follow along with it more, I encourage you to follow my colleague, Kaylee Shapiro. She's really plugged into that sort of stuff. Obviously, Acacia Clement's down there. She knows more than I can ever hope. She'll forget more than I ever hope to learn about some of that stuff. So really encourage you to check out that if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the OBS sales and what's going on in that space. Now, I wanted to wrap up today by talking a little bit about an icon who is stepping away from the microphone. And that is, of course, Trevor Denman, who has retired as the voice of Del Mar. And Trevor Denman has, of course, been a part of our lives for quite some time and has narrated some of the great moments in horse racing history. And he will be missed. His voice was so distinctive. His calls were so colorful. You could close your eyes. You could see the race unfolding in front of you. You didn't need to watch anything. And I always think that is the biggest compliment you can pay a race caller, is that I could close my eyes and see the race. And I could see it play out exactly the way I wanted it. And I also got all the flourishes and all of the colors that I could possibly imagine by listening to your call. And so Trevor Denman stepping away from the microphone. And I will just say, on a personal note, Trevor Denman is the reason I spent 12 hours driving overnight to Keeneland a couple of years ago to see Flightline. Because when he called that Pacific Classic and he said, take a good long look at this, folks, you may never see this again. I realized at that moment that I needed to do whatever I could to see Flightline run one last time. And I knew if I didn't go see him run, I would be kicking myself for the rest of my life, because this was our generation's opportunity to see Secretariat, our generation's opportunity to see Gallant Fox, our generation's opportunity to see a great horse. And I, of course, then wanted to. And so then I drove overnight. I lived in Fairfax, Virginia. Drove, like, God, through West Virginia coal country, and that was an experience into of itself. And got to Lexington late at night, early in the morning, and woke up in time to get to the track. And I was there for the Breeders' Cup, and it was just an amazing weekend, highlighted, of course, by being able to see Flightline win. So would never have happened if not for Trevor Denman and that call resonating with me in such a way that I said, I'm going to go there. And by the way, not so insignificant side note, that was also the very first time I met who ended up becoming a very, very good friend of mine, Sarah El-Badwi. Sarah and I had known each other, and we had planned to meet up at that Breeders' Cup, but that was only after I had told her, yes, I will be coming to the Breeders' Cup because of Trevor Denman's call. And so that was my first time I ever met Sarah in person, and now we're colleagues and close friends up here. So it really was a life-changing weekend in a lot of ways, and it set me on a trajectory to get more involved in this sport and to do more in this sport. So for that, Trevor, thank you. Thank you for all the great calls, and best of luck to Larry Colmus, who's going to be replacing Trevor as the voice at Del Mar, where the turf meets the surf. And so you got to love it out there. But listen, like I said, well-deserved retirement for Trevor Denman, and hope he's able to enjoy all of it. Well, folks, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Win Play Show. Really appreciate you hanging out with me for these last half hour or so. But want to encourage you to press that like button and subscribe before you leave to make sure you get all the great content here on NYRA Bets. All right. My name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.